Hey, it's Angie from Suburban Survival Guide. Tonight we're going to make sourdough pizza. About 4.5 hours ago I got the starter out and I added about 1/4 cup of flour, just white flour, unbleached, and 1/4 cup of warm water. Stirred it in, mixed it really good, and gave it about 4.5 hours to do its little thing to my sourdough, to get it active and bubbly. You need an active starter for this. Then from there, we're going to combine all this together. And as you can see, my starter right now is good. It's bubbly, it's happy, it's ready to go, it's working. Okay, so our next step is to take that active, bubbly sourdough starter, pour it into our bowl. This is about as easy as it gets, guys. There's not a whole lot to sourdough. It's seriously not scary. There's plenty of instructions online on how to get it started and how to get it happy and going. I actually got this start from a friend of mine who found it from a lady online who'd had it in the family, I think, for years. And it's been great. I made the mistake of forgetting about it for about 2 months in the refrigerator, and somehow it managed to be able to be restarted over this last week, and it's just as strong. Okay, to that sourdough, I'm going to add about, let's do our oil first. This is 1/8 cup of oil. It's not an exact science. You kind of will get the feel as you get going more and doing it more, and it'll just become more natural to you. This is 3/4 cup of lukewarm water. It doesn't have to be very, very warm. You don't want it too warm. It'll burn your start. But it doesn't have to be as warm as I normally do it, just because we're doing an overnight one. And then it'll go all day tomorrow too. So it's got plenty of time to rise. Here's my teaspoon of salt and about 1/2 tablespoon of sugar. And this is 2.5 cups of flour. I'm going to put about half in. Now you can do wheat part of this, you can do wheat all of it. I've never done wheat the whole thing, but I think it would just take a little longer rise time. I prefer with sourdough pizza just to do your own, the normal regular white flour. I think it gets a better tang and it's just more traditional, but you adjust it how you want to adjust it for your family's needs. I like to mix it for just a moment with a spoon to start it, just because after that, I'm going to use the dough hook and let my KitchenAid do all the rest of the work. I'm a lazy cook if I can. Once in a while, I like to get my hands in flour, and it's nice, but tonight I just want to go to bed. So we're going to let it do its thing. If it feels like it's a little too thick, we'll add some water to it. If it feels like it's a little bit too thin, we'll add some more flour. As you can see, it's kind of doing what it needs to do. It's getting a nice dough formed that looks to be about the exact amount I need. We'll stop it so you can get an idea. You'll notice it's a little bit sticky, but not really. My finger's not sticking to it at all as I'm touching it and putting it back in. So that's about the perfect amount of flour that we need for this. We're just going to let it go for a little bit longer. You want your dough to go until it gets enough time that it's mixing up that gluten and getting a little bit stretchy, especially with pizza dough. That's really, really important. Okay, so we've let it go. It's probably been a couple minutes, maybe 1.5 minutes. If you'll notice as I pull it up here, it's kind of got a good little stretch to it. Some people will pull it till they can get it paper, not really paper thin, but it doesn't pull apart and it leaves a thin. I kind of like it somewhere in between. I think sourdough has an easier time rising if you don't overmix it and kind of kill everything, but you definitely want a good chew when you're doing pizza. That's just, everybody thinks of the pizza crust as having really good chew to it. So your next trick on this is we're just going to spray the inside of a bowl. I like a clear bowl. I really think yeasts of all kind just do better in glass if you can, but plastic's the next best choice. Metal's not going to be the end of the world. They just tend to rise better. So now this is a trick I've learned. Over time, it makes a difference. It'll speed your stuff up. It just seems to add a little bit more life to your dough. See how I'm mixing it in my hands for a minute? I'm just taking the edge, twisting it over, and kind of making a little bowl as I go around. I just do it for a little bit, and it adds a little bit of air to it, which is, yeast. Sourdough yeast is a living thing, and it's trying to eat all those sugars and that in there, and it just makes all the difference in the world to do that. So then you put it in your bowl, put a lid on it, and I'm done. It's going to sit here overnight. Sometime in the morning I will do a little bit more messing with it, and we'll talk about it it'll just be a matter of moments in your world, but it will have been about 12 hours in sourdough time. Okay, it's been 12 hours, guys. You see the difference in how much that dough has grown? Okay, the next step is easy. Punch it down. Okay, now we're going to spray the bottom of, doesn't really matter, just something to keep the pizza dough in the fridge. So I've sprayed the bottom. I'm going to take and split this dough in half. It doesn't have to be perfect, but this will make 2 small pans of pizza. And I'm going to just do like we did yesterday, twist them over and under onto themselves. Dust a little bit of the bottom of this pan with some flour. Do the other one just like that. See how easy this is? It seriously is just a waiting game with sourdough. It is not a hard one. It's just time consuming. But the great thing about this is the longer you work with it and wait with it and are patient with it, the more sour your dough is going to taste, more authentic. Sourdough is affected by where you live. If you live in an environment with a lot of salt in the air, you're going to have a little bit saltier sourdough. If you live in a moisture environment, it's going to have different microbes living in the air that's going to affect the flavor. I live in Utah, where it's really dry. Our sourdough here tastes wonderful and it's brilliant, but its tang is just a little different than somewhere else. And you can pretty much know that that's going to happen wherever you live. Your sourdough is going to taste different than somewhere else, just because it draws in all the microbes and things that are living in the air. And your yeast is going to grow different and all of that. The longer sourdough has to germinate and melt with your flour and the other things you've mixed in, the stronger that tang is going to taste. So if you're doing something quick, it's going to have less tang to it. If you want it to have more tang, let it sit and meld and do things longer and longer and longer. If I wanted to, I could have punched that down and let it rise again. But this is going to be just exactly about the amount of tang I want in my pizza. We're going to cover this. We're going to set it in the fridge until about 2 or 3 hours before we want to make the pizza. Then we'll set it out on the counter and let it get to room temperature. Okay, as you can see, our sourdough has set out for about 2 hours on the counter, and it's done all the rising it needs. Now the trick is just to roll it out like you would a normal pizza and top it however you want. All pizza dough does better if it's cooked at higher temperatures, especially sourdough. I like to do mine at 450. Anything cooked higher as far as bread dough, especially sourdough, will get a more crusty outside, which is what you want with pizza. If this process does not turn out a sour enough dough for you, the trick is to let it sit in the fridge even longer. Let it mingle with the flour for longer times will bring out more sour flavor to it. I've got my dough. I've got all the toppings I want to do. This recipe makes 2 sourdough pizzas and the sauce and the cheese. But the next trick that I have found, and you can use any pan you want. You can use a stone if you want to. They're all great. But this is the trick that my daughter taught me that she found. And it's one of these pans that has a million little holes in it. And just how it circulates the air through seems to be the one that gives me the best results. But once you pull the pizza out of the oven, and you go to cut it, because of these holes, it kind of leaves a mess when you're cutting it. So I've just learned to put a little slightly bigger solid pizza pan underneath it before I cut it. And it takes care of all the mess, and everything works exactly how you want it. So that's one of our pizzas done. See how quickly that goes. We'll do another one in a moment. We're just going to do pepperoni. Same thing, same process. One of the tricks I found over time that made it quicker for me, and you don't have to do that, but I like to, when I'm being lazy and I don't want to make my own pizza sauce, I open up a can of spaghetti sauce just from the store, put it on my pizza, and what's left over you can save into Ziploc bags in individual, the double pizza serving size, and put it in the freezer till next time you do it. Takes just about a minute 30 seconds in the microwave to thaw, and you're done, and it's easy. Because the whole process of doing this is quite a long one, but the ingredients on top don't need to be. So we're going to take this, and the other one we'll end up making, put it in the oven at 450 when it heats up. It'll take somewhere between 8 and 16 minutes, depending on how thin your crust is, how quickly your oven heats up, and how dark of a crust you like. I think it's going to push us more towards 15 minutes, but we'll find out when we're done with the pizza. Just know to keep checking on it, because at that kind of a temperature, it can go from looking maybe done to burnt really, really fast. I also like to sometimes rotate the pizza while it's in the oven to make sure it's getting evenly cooked about halfway through. Okay guys, we're down to the bottom of it. This one's our pepperoni. We're just going to take it out of the pan, like I had said, and have that little trick of it not making a mess cutting it. As you can see, the bottom turned out beautiful. The other one in the oven is going to probably be another minute. It's in the bottom oven, but every time it's going to be a little different depending on the oven and the pizza. Hear that crunch? It's good stuff. So it's that simple. Pizza, sourdough takes about 24 hours. Seems like forever long, but it really isn't hard as long as you've gotten your sourdough proofed beforehand and you just follow the simple instructions and are patient. It'll be beautiful and wonderful, and it'll be the best pizza you've ever eaten. That took us about 10 minutes. I'm thinking the other one's probably going to take about 2 more, and we should be set. Thanks, guys.